I keep switching. Every time I listen to one of the albums, it jumps up, and then I listen to the next one, and it jumps up.
Hey everybody, welcome to Listography. Jason, Joe, and Kramzer here, and it is time for Albums of the Year 2020.
Woo!
We did it, everybody. We did it.
So, the year 2020, by most metrics, a pretty shit year for most people. But there was a silver lining for us. We were able, with the extra time we were given, to put it into the channel and start releasing a lot of videos. And it's been a good year for the growth of the channel. I think back in April when I posted the first video with Kramzer, I had about 400 subscribers-ish. And last week we cracked the 3,000 mark. So thanks to everybody who has subscribed and been watching and commenting.
Especially those super fans out there like Whammy Bird, Roxanne, Rich Latta. There's a lot of you. And if we're forgetting anybody, we're sorry, but we love you guys.
So for anybody new to the channel, every Friday we've been doing a series called Albums of the Year. And we've been picking our favorite album of each year and giving some runners up. We started in 1965. And we've made it all the way up through 1996, which we put out last week. So we're hitting the pause button here to jump ahead to this current year. And this is going to be kind of an expanded special episode. We're going to give 10 albums each instead of 5. And we're going to go kind of in a circle the way we do during our listography videos and talk about each one in a little bit more depth. The runners-up are actually ranked. They're not in no particular order as they are on our usual videos. So we got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I'll start with, I thought the year was really good. I think years leading up to this, I've kind of come to this conclusion that production and studio work right now is like at an all-time high. All of these albums are produced so well that I've gotten my top 10. Like the little details, the little nuances are just fabulous. And there's a couple repeat offenders on there that have albums and are in the studio. And the other thing I like is kind of this just massive blend of genre. And my taste is like, you can't really put anything in like an old school category and say, this is hard rock, this is jazz, this is R&B. A lot of stuff just is like a big funneled melting pot where you get a little bit of flavor and everything, which I really dig. So many people embrace such a wide variety of direct influences, and I think that's because of how music accessibility has really changed over the last 20 years. It's so easy to get into a lot of different things. You're finally getting these generations of artists that were able to access all of that, and it gets a really nice menagerie of styles and everything in the outcome of what they're producing. And I don't think it's quite as good as some of the older stuff, but as we talked about in videos past, I think there is an even larger amount of really, really good music than ever, but maybe not the Mount Rushmores of masterpieces like there are. For example, I listened to, I think, 112 albums this year, only giving one perfect score to an album and a lot of like near perfect scores, whereas like a year like 1971 would probably have like 12 perfect scores for me. But, you know, it's a great time to be alive and to enjoy good music because it's easy to get to and there's a lot of it to me. And in a contrary opinion, here's Joseph Steigerwald.
Thank you, Kramzer. As the resident hater of this channel...
You hate the channel?
No, I love the channel. I like... Music's fine in 2020. I don't know how like our regular viewers feel about 2020. It seems like they're, predisposed to like the 70s the most, as am I, but there's a lot of good music out right now. I think as a whole, the pool of goodness has never been larger, owing to, the, better production, and everyone kind of has access to this. You can make a really good album in your basement, basically. So I think there's a ton of good music out. Like Kramzer, there's no super, high peaks. There's no none of these albums are going on my Mount Rushmore. I gave out 1 4.5 this year, no 5s. But, I think I have 24 stars, and a lot of other ones that are just sort of right under. I listened to 171 albums this year, and in general, I think they're mostly good. Even the ones that 3 stars, I think are pretty solid. But for me, it just doesn't have those super heights that I'm looking for. I don't know if I'm ever going to listen to any of these albums again after this year. We'll see. It wasn't a waste of time. I enjoyed listening to all 171 or whatever, and I tried to get out there in different genres, little rap, little pop, all that. I think it's a terrible year for mainstream music. I think it's just one of the worst of all time. But, the margins is where you're going to find the good stuff. So all in all, a fine year.
I'd say there's 40 to 50 albums I will reach to again in the future.
Maybe 3 for me.
Probably more than that for me even. So yeah, lots of good stuff. I didn't really give my picks, give them all rankings. The only ones I really gave stars to are the ones that we reviewed on the channel. So I don't know exactly how many 5 and 4.5s I have, but probably more than the two of you. You guys want to get into it? Who's going to start with number 10?
Well, let's start by saying this really is Christmas for us. We are really excited for this video. We talk a little bit about stuff we like, but when we do albums of the year, we've been friends for 20 plus years. We know what each other kind of likes. We have old school reviews and old lists to go by to kind of get a feel. We're kind of going in completely blind to this. So maybe a little bit of inclination, but I am so excited to see what you guys have. It's like Christmas morning for me. I can't wait. I have no idea, especially for Joe. I have no clue what it's going to be.
Well, Kramzer, Merry Christmas to you. Here's your first present. At number 10, in 2020, I have Nobody Lives Here Anymore by Cutworms. Really, this is a late edition. This kicked off my former number 10, which was Kathleen Edwards' Total Freedom. Sorry, Kathleen. But I like this one a little bit more. It's got this great sort of, it's not alt country, but to quote Graham Parsons, it's kind of cosmic American music. It's very warm, very 60s, late 60s, early 70s, Byrds, George Harrison, very strong influence. He kind of lets that Roger McGuinn, George Harrison kind of vocal style, kick in a lot. He recorded in Memphis, so he kind of went all out with this one. Max Clark, whose stage name is Cutworms, which don't love the name, buddy, but that's all right. You make a quality album. It's a double album, maybe a little overstuffed, but lots of great stuff. Sold My Soul is definitely the standout for me. And I just love the way it sounds vintage. Every little detail, the drums, the guitars, the steel lap guitars, the 12-string guitars, the vocals, the backup vocals, just all really sounds like that era, which obviously I love. The songwriting's good, lots of hooks and melodies. It's never boring, even through the double album length. And it's just, it makes you feel warm when you listen to it. It's a great kind of cruising down the highway, not too fast, just nowhere to go, just sort of on your way through life to the Midwest. Very cool album by Cutworms. So yes, number 10 for me, Nobody Lives Here Anymore, Cutworms. Yeah, here we go, number 10. Were you expecting that? Was that a surprise to you?
Big surprise. It's also one I didn't get around to listen to. It is on my list, but I never got to listen to. My number 10 is going to be probably a big shock to both of you. Future Nostalgia by Dua Lipa. I knew Joe would be happy with this one. Jason probably couldn't give a rat's ass. But yeah, I got a nice eclectic mix of styles here. This one has traditional modern pop glaze, especially with the vocal melodies and the hooks. But really, this is like an old school disco boogie electro pop album. Kind of conjures up Daft Punk, Kylie Minogue, and especially some really good mid-2000s work by Justice and like that really good Genesis album. She had a really cool vision for this, exactly how she wanted the sound to be. Really boogie, kind of gives you like those 70s roller skate ring vibes. It's super positive all the way through, makes you smile, makes you tap your foot. She brought on so many countless producers for each song to make sure she kind of had the sound that she wanted. I'm not going to list them because there are so many, and I don't know half of them, to be honest. Because again, this isn't, my traditional style of music, but it is one of the better, it is, looking at the rest of my list, easily my favorite pop record A bunch of these songs did really well on the charts, especially Don't Start Now. You've probably heard it. Really good, just hopping, bopping melodies. Love that song I just mentioned. Everything has just a really nice upbeat tempo. Really tight. It's not factory produced. Like, it doesn't have that cheap sound to it. Every song can be really accessible for like a really good live performance. A song like Cool has a really cool, like, sick Stranger Things synth sound lead to it. You know, it's really unforgiving with this momentum and great pacing. You never kind of run out of steam, but you never get overwhelmed with like the electricity in it. It's got really cool 80s pop sensibilities, 90s house club vibes, but again, it has just like that 70s disco texture on it all the way. Just like this thrilling ride about midnight kind of journeys with love and fun and sex. It's got a song called But Pretty Please. It's kind of like one of the only slower jams on it, just like kind of the need to like get a hookup just to like kind of take the edge off. So it's like really relatable for a lot of millennial and Gen Z culture, whatever letter we're on by now. All the songs are such good, just like little pop pieces that you could rearrange them in almost any way on the album and the album would still work. And almost any of them could be on the radio. So, you know, it's really kind of super simple, but the details and the production and the style and the design is awesome. Makes you smile, makes you feel good, makes you dance. Not always my cup of tea, but this one knocks it out of the park. Future Nostalgia by Dua Lipa. My favorite track is probably Levitating.
I love that pick, Kramzer. I was real close to putting that on my list. Just missed it, but I love that album. So very happy to see it on your list.
I was watching SNL this past week with my wife, and Dua Lipa was the musical guest. And I said, I think Joe will have this on his list. And turns out it was Cram. It's gonna be a wild ride. I'm excited to see the rest of these lists because it's already proving to be quite interesting.
I also saw the performance, thought it was really good, and thought this will not be on Jason's list.
Yeah, you nailed it. My number 10 is going to be Unfollow the Rules by Rufus Wainwright, produced by Mitchell Froome. You've got a lot of really great session players on this record, most notably probably Blake Mills on guitar for the majority of the album. You've also got Jim Keltner and Matt Chamberlain playing drums. For anyone who doesn't know by now, Rufus is the son of Kate McGarrigle and Loudon Wainwright III. His sister is Martha Wainwright. Very talented and musical family. Put out his debut album in 98. But after 2012's Out of the Game, he left pop music for a while. He wrote some operas and was doing other projects, but comes back this year with his first pop record in quite a while. But he's sounding as good as ever. His voice is fantastic on it. There's gorgeous melodies all through this record. I love the arrangements. It's very organic and warm sounding, but there's flourishes of orchestral stuff happening. There's a little bit of synth here and there just for some color and some texture. Rufus is now getting a little older, 47. He's married. He has a kid. So this is kind of his domestic bliss record. He's writing with a bit more confidence. I would say like a quiet confidence, and there's a feeling of contentment all through this record, but that contentment doesn't lead to blandness or artistic stagnation at all. I think it's still really, really great record. One of these sort of late period artistic statements. Beautiful, masterful, well recorded, well produced, well performed, just really solid, great, enjoyable record.
I, too, listened to that album and liked it a good bit. I sometimes have trouble getting through an entire Rufus album because I can't really pinpoint how much I like his voice because it's really a cool sound, but it doesn't really fluctuate that much. So a lot of times by the end of his albums, I get a little bit drained out, but I never dislike him. I believe Joe and I saw him live when he opened for Ben Folds in like 0203.
That we did, Ryan. Guster was also there. It was a great show. Well, I guess we're on to number 9. For me, we'll go with an oldie, a classic rock band, if you will, but not that classic. We're talking Gigaton by Pearl Jam is my number 9. I think just a massive return to form for these guys. It kind of, big Pearl Jam fan, obviously, if you've been watching our best of years. You would have seen Pearl Jam winning in 91, being nominated in 93. But lately, the 2000s, 2010s kind of fell off for me. This is kind of return to that classic sound, closer to 10 and Yield, that between there, then, like their self-titled or Backspacer from, the past couple releases, which it sort of saw them experimenting with a little more punk, a little less, that classic big grunge sound. But I think this is a really nice return to form for them. I think they all sound great. Eddie Vedder vocally I think this is his best in a while. He's back to sort of sounding like right on the precipice of being insane on some of these. Quick Escape, really love. He's just right on the edge, and I think that really kind of helps. I like the singles, Superbud Wolf Moon, Dance of Clairvoyance. I think we're both good, sort of different-ish, but still kind of retaining that classic sound. There's nothing too surprising here. I think everyone knows what Pearl Jam sounds like. But I think just sort of the hooks and the melodies and the songwriting kind of come together a little bit more on this one than in the past couple albums. There's plenty of harmonies, sort of 10 style backing vocals, and some synth and some keys on here, which provides some nice color. I just thought it was a good album. I love Pearl Jam. I think this is probably their best since Yield or Binaural, so definitely kind of surprised me. I kind of had written them off a little bit, but they can still rock. Gigaton, or I don't know if it's Gigaton or Gigaton, depends on where you fall on that whole issue with the G's. But either way, great album from Pearl Jam.
Yeah, I like that album a good bit too. And I would say there were some surprises. They had some synth and like some loops in some tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And just a shout out to everyone to keep an eye on. We are going to be releasing some playlists of some of our more favorite tracks of the year, and I will be featuring songs from each of the last two albums mentioned by my esteemed colleagues. Yeah, I like that Pearl Jam album a lot. Didn't make my top 10, but definitely thumbs up. Agree with pretty much everything you said. All right, my number 9 is going to be Gray by Moses Sumney. I kind of had a wild ride with this album throughout the year. It came out earlier. He released the first half really early. I'd never listened to the previous stuff before this one, but, I follow a couple of publications that just were like in love with it, so I gave it a shot. I loved it at first, then it kind of dipped a little bit, and then when I was getting into my lists, it really rose back up because it really just sticks out like a sore thumb. It's really unique. If you haven't heard it, it's just like this really epic, creative R&B tapestry of soul. A lot of influence from like some just like jazz and Motown, Prince, CeeLo Green, maybe even some Radiohead, Tom York in there. Like there's some really cool percussive polyrhythms in there that have like a Radiohead style, which obviously I love if you follow the channel. The vocals are at the forefront though. It's a really impressive vocal performance, especially on a song like Me in 20 Years. Some of the songs have a lot of complex density with the sound, and some of them are really stripped down, but there's always a nice balance. Like a song like In Bloom is really simple and has just like some really very pretty fluttering like little guitar or like just some like vibrating bass that'll come in. The whole album kind of feels like just like this slowed down walk, kind of like this stop and smell the roses kind of attitude. A lot of it is about sensations, and a lot of it is just about sort of like this anti-masculinity sentiment, which is really cool. Varial's probably my favorite song on it. The whole album just has like this beautiful never-ending vibe. Not too sparkly. It's kind of really low, but good balance, a little ominous. Yeah, it's a bit of a hard album to explain because it is really artistic, but it's definitely worth checking out. Really grips you and impresses you at the same time. And it just kind of works like he had like all of these ideas that combusted and exploded within him. And now you're just getting kind of like the gaseous, just kind of like chill aftermath of it because the emotion's there, but it's not like a really vigorous, speedy up-tempo thing, but kind of like the ideas are. So I really dug this quite a lot. Number 9, Gray by Moses Sumney.
Another great pick, Ramsey. You're really killing it here. It didn't make my list, but one of the songs from the album did make my top songs of the year. So we're in sync here. That's great.
All right, moving right along. My number 9 is going to be Star Maker by Honey Harper. This might be the most difficult record on my top 10 to describe. I think the sort of umbrella genre that it would fall under would be country, but whatever the word country makes you think of in your mind is probably not what this record actually sounds like. The most country thing about it is his voice. He does have kind of a drawl and a twang to his voice, but the music isn't really that country. There's some pedal steel on it and stuff, but it's more to create atmosphere. He describes his sound as celestial honky tonk. I think he's kind of borrowing a little from the Cosmic Country, kind of playing on that. And I think the word celestial is really good to describe it. It's very otherworldly, very kind of dreamlike. The arrangements are sparse. The song Vaguely Satisfied, mostly acoustic guitar, and there's like a pan flute solo on it. Suzuki Dreams has very lush orchestral arrangements. He said that he hopes to revitalize country music for people who don't like country music. I think he does a good job of that. The melodies are really sweetly sung, very beautiful. It's a very, very pretty record. I would urge people who maybe are kind of allergic to the word country to still give it a shot. I think there's a chance that a lot of people may be surprised and really enjoy it. Give it a try. I think it's not going to be for everybody, but I think the people that like it are going to really love it.
Another album that didn't make my list, but a song from this album is on my songs list. Very cool album.
It's kind of like country on a farm on the moon. Like it's pretty cool. I thought you might like that quite a bit.
I heard it described as like shoegaze country before.
That's pretty good too. Or bootgaze.
Bootgaze, there you go. Dang, Kramzer.
Ooh.
Fire.
TM that shit right here on the side of me.
Okay, let's get to number 8. This is a fun album from a place that not a lot of bands come from. Straight from New Zealand, we have The Beths with Jump Rope Gazers. Really fun, sort of crunchy, dreamy pop, little Weezer, little Always, little Cranberries. Super fun, up-tempo. Elizabeth Stokes, the lead singer, has a cool kind of floaty voice that jumps around, a little bit like Dolores O'Riordan from the Cranberries. But the band, it's not quite, sort of in the Weezer variety. They can rock out. It's not just sort of dreamy, kind of meandering pop music. There's some cool guitar solos, that they get fiery, they get energetic, not a lot of slow stuff. It's up tempo. It's fun, catchy melodies. Big fan of Jump Rope Gazers, the song, and Dying to Believe, probably my 2 favorites. Just a lot of energy. The songs have that cool build, they sort of start out and then just sort of, the energy kind of builds up. You have those cool kind of explosions through the chorus. Plenty vulnerable though. I don't know. It's just a really good pop rock album. If you like Weezer, if you like Always, you'll definitely like this one. So I don't know. Number 8, The Beths, Jump Rope Gazers.
Another album by Joe that I have not heard, which isn't too surprising. We tend to follow a bit of a different crowd, but we're still really good friends. My number 8 is going to be Made of Rain by the Psychedelic Furs. Confidently can say this is my favorite or the best rock album of the year. They haven't released an album in a long, long time, and they don't miss a beat. What's really cool is they're able to stick to their identity and refresh it all at the same time. We did an album review of this, Jason and myself, a few months ago when it came out, so you can check that out. But it is a really awesome, just cool feel to it. Numbing, hazy, smoky, cloudy, pain-soaked atmosphere with just like these soaring guitars and just like these jagged, short, venomous right angles ripping through the sound. He can be such a cool, like, just dickhead on vocals sometimes. It's kind of just like bitter and sneering, kind of about reality versus fantasy of like relationships and romance, but it's not like lost in the haze of the music. He's really kind of sharp and focused and woke through all of this. Like we talked about in the other video, the drums are really impressive on this album in a really old school way to play drums. It's really slanted and jagged, but still keeping good rock beats, kind of tumbling, but hard, really heavy and ferocious with a lot of intensity. And the drums tell the story a lot, which, is always a really good indicator of great drumming. Really cool, like new age gothic feel to it. And the songs work in like a classic rock album kind of fashion, kind of taking you on a ride. A lot of the songs kind of stick together with conjunction, like they're glued together. Wrong Train, probably my favorite track on it. The leadoff track, The Boy That Invented Rock and Roll, is really good and explosive. You'll Be Mine is one of the only songs on it I'm not crazy about. It's kind of got like this weird Irish Celtic flair to it. But pretty much the whole thing is just a really good rock ride with a really good expressionist vocal performance on it by Richard Butler, who I think is a pretty underrated performer as a vocalist throughout the years. A little bit of minimal synth. It's not going to sound like an old school Psychedelic Furs, but it's got kind of that, a really good highlight of just like hot sax that comes in and cuts through all of the cloud and smoke at times. So it's not necessarily a really dark album, but it puts you in a pretty cool noirish mood. So really this was also a big surprise for me, and I think Jason didn't expect a lot out of this album, and it really knocked it out of the park. So number 8, Made of Rain by the Psychedelic Furs.
Yeah, it was a surprise. I really enjoyed that record. It didn't make my top 10, but it is in my top 100. My number 8
close.
My number 8 is going to be Listening to the Music by Zephaniah O'Hora. This was produced by Neil Casal, who was formerly in Ryan Adams and the Cardinals. This, I think, was the last thing he worked on before he sadly passed away. This is a country record, nothing celestial about it. This is straight up country, but it's really, really good. Growing up, my grandfather on my dad's side of the family was a country fan, and his house was pretty much one of the only places I really heard country music as a kid. He would play Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, George Jones, Kenny Rogers, Glenn Campbell, all that kind of stuff. And I swear to God, when I listen to this record, I can smell his house. That is how authentic this record is. It triggers these like sensory responses to memories that the music itself isn't actually involved with. So absolutely nails the sound. But it's not just a genre exercise. The songwriting is really good, classic country songwriting. And I think it's some of the best musicianship that you'll find on any record this year. The playing on it's awesome. Like I said, Neil Casal behind the boards. You also have John Graboff, who was in the Cardinals, on pedal steel, and John Shannon on guitar, who's just a killer guitar player. I think he's from Pittsburgh. Not sure about that, but I believe so. If you don't like country music, you can probably skip this one. But if you're kind of like on the fence or maybe thinking about getting into country, I think it's a great one to check out. Incredible playing, great singing. If you want to hear an example of that great playing, check out the track Riding That Train. But my number 8, Listening to the Music by Zephaniah O'Hora.
An album I hadn't heard, so that's interesting. It's something for me to check out as a sort of country fan adjacent, I'll say that.
Yeah, I'm probably even more adjacent than Joe. I love country sound and country instrumentation, but usually straight up country songs or a whole album don't always do it for me. I did listen to a couple that could be categorized as such this year, and none of them really blew me away. We're all through all the number 8, 10, 9, and 8s. Are we going to have 30 different albums? I don't think so, but there's going to be a lot.
Might be. We'll see. I don't think anyone's going to have this one on their list. But speaking of great playing, at number 7, I have Thundercat with It Is What It Is. And Thundercat's, he's an interesting dude. He's a producer, works a lot with Flying Lotus, did stuff with Kendrick Lamar, but his solo stuff is pure like space funk, progressive R&B. He's an incredible bass player. Some of his playing on this, Interstellar Love in particular, just ridiculous. He's just one of those dynamic virtuosos of the bass, can play anything. Kind of cool, funky R&B jazz style. And this whole album, it's weird. It's a super weird album. He goes from spacey R&B to sort of rap adjacent to just sort of comedy stuff. You know, he's a funny dude. He has a song called Dragon Ball Do-Rag on here, which is great. It's a ridiculous song, just completely insane. You have to hear it. You know, just the grooves on this album are so good. Not too many guest stars. You know, he doesn't have a bunch of outsiders coming in. It's sort of his vision. Childish Gambino guests on one track. But he doesn't take it over. It's still Thundercats show. If you don't like sort of that spacey progressive R&B, you know, Kamasai Washington sort of style, probably won't like this. But if you want to hear just incredible bass playing, funky, slick grooves, cool synth, he's got a really super high kind of falsetto, almost completely vocal style. So it all just kind of, you know, awashes you in this sort of spacey, interstellar kind of feel, which I love. I love his bass playing as a former bass player. I just love hearing sort of just what he can do. And it's, you know, it's just a cool album. There's nothing else like it. You won't hear anything even close to this at all. Sort of its own genre. I loved it. I dig it. I love Thundercat. I love his production. I love his solo stuff. So it is what it is. Number 7.
Another one I'm not familiar with. Didn't listen to. Jason, did you listen to that?
I did, yeah. I like it. I really admire Thundercat as a bass player. Really cool. It's just like not really my preferred genre of music, but as a player, he's a beast.
Well, if my boys like it, I'll have to check it out. All right, let's get to my number 7, which is going to be one I think Jason might have considered and just missed his top 10. Even though it's his style, I think I didn't hear him talk about it. I didn't hear the hype train, the Oscar buzz from him on this one too much. That's going to be Punisher by Phoebe Bridgers. I believe Joe liked this album a lot too. We'll check back in with him in a second, but this is a really great album. Probably my favorite lyrical album of the year. It's quite bleak and gray, but so inventive in its voice and where she's coming from and the expressionism. You really just, the style of her writing is really cool. Makes you want to read all the lyrics on page, maybe get, you know, whatever poetry, short stories, novellas she's ever thought of in her head. I want to hear it all. Kind of examines the same thing over and over. Songs about kind of the aftermath of like emotional letdown. Takes on a lot of different lenses and a lot of different dimensions, and kind of about how all of this changes her. And she does it through like how it involves her social life, physicalities. Like she says in the song Garden, I don't know how, but I'm taller. Must be something in the water. About kind of feeling lost about it. You know, she says in one song, I've been running around in circles trying to pretend to be myself. Really just cool ideas here and the flavor of the writing. Sound-wise, you know, it doesn't venture too far out of like kind of like just that classic singer-songwriter indie rock style, but a lot of the playing is immaculate. She wasn't afraid to bring in some help with the writing, I think, musically. Connor Oberst comes in, Blake Mills plays on some of the stuff. Her voice is really good, really low key. She's got kind of like an Elliott Smith style who she talks about a lot in interviews, so you can see it all over the album. You know, she's such like kind of like a nihilist and pessimist, but in kind of like a really cute way without being too overwhelming. In the song Halloween, she says, I hate living by the hospital. The sirens go all night. I used to joke that if I woke you up, somebody better be dying, which is kind of just like her in a nutshell. I love the vibe of this. The call-outs in the writing are great. She talks a lot about other musicians arguing about John Lennon. They call out talking about, I think she's talking about a story with her boyfriend when she says, we hate tears in heaven, but it is sad that the baby died. Just really good character in her writing. The music is really good too, but I think the writing is the standout here. So Punisher by Phoebe Bridgers, definitely a really great album for songwriting.
It was on my short list. It was. I had to docket a point for that quip about Eric Clapton's son dying. I didn't like that one. Thought it was kind of cheap. So, but it is a great album, but a little too low key for me to really love it. So just missed. Probably the best lyrics of the year though.
Yeah, I really like Phoebe Bridgers. My number 22 of the year, in fact. My number 7 is going to be How Ill Thy World Is Ordered by Daniel Romano's Outfit. It's my number 7 album of the year, but Daniel easily gets my artist of the year. One of, if not my very favorite songwriter that's active right now. He released 11 albums this year, just a crazy, insane amount of music. All of it's really cool, very good, all worth checking out. Covered a lot of different genres on these records. He released a 22-minute prog single with Danny Carey from Tool on drums. He released a couple punk EPs. He released a fantastic live album. But this one, a lot of those releases were exclusive to Bandcamp. This is the one that got the full physical release treatment. So I think that's kind of a sign that this is the real artistic statement that he was trying to make this year. Really great record, kind of in the vein of his 2017 release, kind of that electrified Dylan sort of sound with little touches of maybe the Velvet Underground or the Kinks or a lot of like 60s rock and roll stuff. Fantastic lyricist. And I think he's just kind of a genius writer, and the way he just churns it out so effortlessly is really incredible. His band is amazing. His brother, Ian Romano, is one of the great rock and roll drummers around right now. Roddy Rossetti's bass playing is really melodic, very cool, kind of McCartney-esque. David Nardi on guitar, really great. The guitar tone at the beginning of the title track and the guitar solo on that song is some of the best guitar sounds of the year. Check this record out. I think fans of the channel will really enjoy it. And if you do enjoy it, there's a whole world of amazing music to discover in Daniel Romano's catalog. Number 7 for me, How Ill Thy World Is Ordered.
I missed all of those albums by Daniel Romano and his outfit this year.
I listened to a couple because Jason has really been praising him for a while, and I like it, but not. I don't see the brilliance that Jason does, but a good listen. Check it out. Jason is brilliant. So if he says give it a shot, you should.
Coming in at number 6 for me, I got The Killers with Imploding the Mirage. Fantastic comeback for me, again, for The Killers. Didn't really like any of their last albums, going back all the way to Sam's Town, really, if we're being honest. Kind of written them off. You know, the Man was a kind of fun little oddity, novelty song, but their last release back in 2017, Wonderful, Wonderful, it just didn't do it for me. Kind of lost their magic, but this one, they kind of rediscovered the magic. I think Brandon Flowers maybe took over a little bit more. This was without the regular guitarist, Dave Koning. He brought in Lindsey Buckingham for some guitar. He brought in Adam Grant Lucille to do some keys stuff. Katie Lang's on the track. Ariel Reichstad, one track doing guitar and bass. Roger Joseph Manning Jr. from Jellyfish is on the first track. So he brought a bunch of kind of outsiders to help him with this one. And it kind of channels back to his solo album that he did, which had a real sort of synthy 80s Bruce Springsteen sort of transposed sound to it, which I loved. One of my favorite albums of the 2010s. And I think this one sort of, takes its cues from that, ton of big synths, ton of big choruses, it's the perfect flying down the highway, driving really fast. You don't want to take it slow. This is balls to the wall, heading out to the heartland. And it's exactly what I want in a Killers album. I don't want the kind of laid back sort of mopey stuff that they had been doing in the past. I want everything over the top, big. And this one just nails it. My Own Soul's Warning, Blowback, Dying Breed, and Caution are all sort of, fist pump, just, big songs. And I love it. It's just a great turn to form. This is the path I want them to take. If you're listening, Brandon, keep going with this. It's working for you. Number 6, Imploding the Mirage by The Killers.
That was another album that we reviewed if you check out the channel. But it did kind of let me down because I love early Killer stuff and I really love Brandon Flowers' certain solo album from a few years back. But it wasn't a total fail. All right, my number 6 is going to be a name you've heard a lot already, Blake Mills with Mutable Set. To me, Blake Mills is the MVP of 2020. He was on the last album I mentioned. I believe Jason's mentioned him. I don't even know if we're done talking about him, but really just a virtuoso in so many ways. This album is definitely not for everybody, and it's definitely not for the radio. It kind of works as this really cool, tense, pensive, weary kind of film score almost, the way it's just kind of really slow and plodding, and the composition of the music really works in these sort of like loops, hypnotic loops that kind of just trap you in like this wandering state, kind of reminiscent of a really good old, not super old, but French duo Air, and the way they kind of construct their music. Really simple lyrics, but it's all about the feel of this album. It's very desolate, and the way just like the words of the page and the studio output and like this lush symphonic quality just create like this really cool poetry. Immaculate production on this, but you need headphones to kind of get the subtlety of the details on this. The way he builds these environments and the way they kind of even like slowly can shift within a song, like they're slow moving plate tectonics, really impressive. You know, it's got this ghostly kind of croony wooden feel to it. I love slow music. I will say this, a small nitpick I have that maybe doesn't elevate it in the top 5 or perfect score for me is it could use just a little bit of a jolt. I don't want to dismiss how nice and sedative it is and meditative it is, but it could use just a little bit, not necessarily even in tempo or loudness, just like a little bit of more emotional heaviness to kind of put it over the edge into grandness. Not a bad track on it. It works obviously much better as a whole album listen than just, you know, it's not the type of album where you're going to pick a song and put it on a playlist and enjoy it on the ride into work so much. But my favorite track probably is Money is the One True God. But this is just a really remarkable work of art, with especially in the studio, which is where Blake Mills just is amazing. And I've only really known about him for a couple of years, but this is the year that he took off. Not a really bombastic singer, but does whatever he can to suit the song just perfectly. And it is an incredible album. Number 6, Mutable Set by Blake Mills.
Missed that one. Sounds great, but I didn't listen to it.
I'm right there with you with the Blake Mills love. Been one of my favorites. Saw him live a few years back. Just probably the best guitar player on the planet. He's unbelievable. Great producer as well. And speaking of his production, here's one that he produced. I've got at number 6, Set My Heart on Fire Immediately by Perfume Genius. This is the recording project of Mike Hadrius. This is his 5th album under the Perfume Genius name. The first record of his that I heard was his 2nd album called Put Your Back Into It, which is a very, very sparse record. And I was immediately struck by the raw emotional quality of his vocals. Then with his 4th record, he paired with Blake, and I just thought it was a match made in heaven. I was really, really excited when I heard that Blake was coming back to produce this record as well. It's one of the most perfect marriages of artist and producer that I think there is. They both give each other so much room. Blake's fingerprints are all over this record. You can hear like 10 seconds of an instrumental and immediately know that Blake's involved. But at the same time, Blake's not stepping on Mike's toes at all. I mean, he's really staying out of the way of the songs. The vocals are incredible, very emotional and very raw, as they always are with Perfume Genius. And I think it's really great. Matt Chamberlain and Jim Keltner are both on this record as well. You got Pino Palladino on bass, Phoebe Bridgers and Ethan Gruska on backing vocals. So it's kind of like the same cast of characters that keep turning up on all these albums, and they are just knocking it out of the park every time, it seems like. This is a great one. There's a lot of variety on this record. I think maybe more variety than on any other Perfume Genius record. You've got some songs that are really danceable. You've got songs that are really hushed and quiet. Some songs that are kind of Baroque. The track Jason is... features harpsichord very prominently. I think there's also a bit more storytelling on this record than on past albums of his. He cited Townes Van Zandt as a major inspiration. So yeah, can't recommend this one enough. At times throughout the year, this was my number 1, and it bounced around a little. Really, these top 6 or so are almost interchangeable. They're all fantastic. I'm
glad you mentioned these interwoven musicians that keep popping up. It's such a cool community with Blake Mills working with, Phoebe Bridgers, who's working with Connor Oberst. They're all working together. It's, like a big Laurel Canyon style of community. And it's just great. They need to just do a massive show with all of them.
No, I don't know if I like that whole style of everybody. It kind of sounds the same to me. I like Perfume Genius, though. I thought it was a pretty good album. I really love the first half of that, I'll say that. I think it gets a little boring towards the end, but to each their own. For moi, we're entering the top 5 here, and this is a band, really weird. Their last album was about a monkey who goes to school and then rebels against society. So remember that when you go into an album like this. Songs to the General Public by the Lemon Twigs. This is a very cool album. This really speaks to me as a huge fan of the 70s and glam rock and classic rock and that whole universe. The Lemon Twigs on this one really try to recreate those sounds. And it's fantastic work, because they really do. The Diodario brothers, they take a little bit of everything. It's a pastiche of Billy Joel and Meatloaf, and there's some David Bowie and Queen and ELO. You have a track like No One Holds You Closer Than When You Haven't Met, where you have like these Bee Gee backing vocals. The synth sounds like it's straight out of a Stevie Wonder album. Incredibly catchy, really takes you back. They do a great job of recreating not just the sound, but the feel, the warmth, even when they're talking about kind of bizarre stuff. It's brilliant. It works for me really well. I can see, critics are sort of mixed on this. They always, say it's a little bit too much, but there's never enough 70s kind of feel for me. The Billy Joel stuff on Live in Favor of Tomorrow, it's crazy how much you're almost transported to listening to a Billy Joel album just for seconds, and then they kind of pull it back and get into a whole bunch of other sounds. But it's all brilliant. You get some Bowie on Leather Together, some Queen all over the place. Like I said, ELO, a little Bruce Springsteen, just everything. Everything you want from the 70s is sort of on this album. And the playing's phenomenal. The production's phenomenal. The vocals are cool. They're playful. Just incredible stuff. Not everything works perfectly. There's some songs that are sort of like, well, maybe you need to tighten that up. But the ones that do, Live in Favor Tomorrow, No One Holds You Closer Than When You Haven't Met, Somebody Loving You, Moon, Leather Together. Some of my favorite songs of the year, easily. And I think it's just a really cool album. Definitely, if you like the 70s, you'll probably like this one. So, Songs to the General Public by the Lemon Twigs, number 5.
I did like that album, but I am one of those people that think it's just a little bit too much of... They're definitely not stealing. They're not Greta Van Fleet, who is just a costume band that's ripping them off. But I would really like for them to take that core of sound and get a little bit more into their own thing. But they're definitely enjoyable. It's just never going to reach that hump of stuff I love. But good pick nonetheless. My number 5 is one I think one of us will talk about again later. I think it's Joe, but we will see. Down in the Weeds Where the World Once Was by Bright Eyes. Did an album review on this before as well. Check it out. Loved it then, love it now, probably even a little bit more. Didn't anticipate it getting in the top 5. And on the video we did, I said there's not a lot of standout banger Bright Eyes tracks, but that was too quick to say because weeks and months went by and there's 6 or 7 songs that kept showing up in my rotation and are now among my favorite individual tracks of the year, like Dance and Sing, Mariana Trench, Just Once in the World is probably my favorite, Pan and Broom, Tilt-A-Whirl, there's a lot. I will say probably Phoebe Bridgers' album just barely edges it out for my pure favorite songwriting of the year, but this one is just really delightful and has a lot more musical elements to it that give it a bit of the edge over that album for me, especially with just the arrangements and the just wide tapestry of instruments on this. I mean, name an instrument that doesn't make an appearance on this album. It's really difficult. Really cool kind of cryptic lyrics about like an idea of sort of like an apocalypse of where the world exists in his vision after like everything's crumbled down emotionally, and just really great simple melodies and catchy songs. The rawness of the writing, you know, you could just sing these songs at a campfire without any instruments and they would still work. They're just put together that well. It's not the old Bright Eyes from the mid to late 90s, early 2000s, where it's just these raw, kind of just swooning, throbbing heartache vocals. The craft is here so much. One of my favorite Bright Eyes records, maybe my favorite. And, to me, the musicianship and the just arrangements of the instruments are just beautiful on this. So number 5, Down in the Weeds Where the World Once Was by Bright Eyes.
All right. My number 5 is going to be The World at Night by Walter Martin. Walter Martin was a former member of the Walkmen, and I think through his solo career is proving to be an incredible songwriter in his own right. His songs are so simple and sweet. They sound like the sort of like silly little songs that you might make up to yourself and sing around the house, or like sing to your kids or something like that. But he has this willingness to not overwrite and to not dig too deep, and really just kind of like we talked about in the John Lennon video about an artist being able to stay out of their own way. And I think he really does that. And the result, when he takes these simple little ideas into the studio and records them and adds orchestrations, these little ruminations take on kind of this profound and illuminating feeling. There's really kind of like a childlike quality, a certain innocence to it. Even when you look at the album cover, it kind of looks like a children's book. And that's kind of the feeling of the album. It's this very sort of magical and enchanting little record. And it's just really, really good. Simple songs, like I said, but just really cool, really heartwarming kind of record as well. So I think if that's sort of something you're looking for, this is a good place to turn. Really, really good stuff.
That's one I didn't listen to, but it's top 5 for Jason. It goes on my list to listen to.
I didn't listen to it either, so that's another one. Jason finds these deep cuts, man. It's hard to keep up with someone as prolific as Jason. Moving on to the top 4. For number 4, I have the Deftones. Actually, no, it's just Deftones with Ohms, their 9th studio album. I love Deftones. If you love Deftones, you'll love this album. If you don't like Deftones, this album will not do anything to convince you to like Deftones. It's very Deftone. They don't change too much, let's be honest. For this one, they brought back Terry Date to produce. He did White Pony, which most people know Deftones for that one. He also did a lot of Pantera. I did early Soundgarden, so did Limp Bizkit. Not that that's good, but he has a style that definitely works for these metal bands. It's huge, it's moody, it's dark, everything's sort of tortured, and there's not a lot of prettiness on this album. A lot of kind of shifting, kind of drone guitars that kind of surprise you all over the place. Chino Moreno is a master of kind of going from the screaming to crooning. I think the songwriting's just better on this than probably the last couple, but I loved Gore. I love Koi no Yokan. If you like the Deftones, you're going to like this. It's a little catchier and more tuneful, I think, than Gore. So I think that works in their favor. There's nothing quite as radio ready as stuff you'd find on White Pony, like Changing the House of Flies. But for me, Deftones is just probably one of the most consistent bands of the last 20 years. And this sort of just continues their hot streak. Just a great band in my mind if you like that kind of metal stuff, which I know no one else here does, but I do. Brutal, listenable, catchy, just kind of runs the gamut for me of everything I want in a metal album. So number 4, Ohms, Deftones.
It's true. Definitely not my style or my favorite style. However, in that arena, Deftones is a band that I do like. And I think White Pony is an amazing album. I did not dislike the album that Joe was just talking about, but I didn't love it. But a good pick. I thought it was fine. All right, my number 4 is an album that probably people are sick of hearing about, but shouldn't be sick listening to, and that's going to be Fetch the Bolt Cutters by Fiona Apple. It's kind of like the unanimous number 1 on most lists now. It's, I think Pitchfork gave it a perfect 10. A couple other people gave it like the first perfect score in a long time. And it's totally worthy of all that praise because it doesn't sound like anything you've really ever heard before. The songs are so unpredictable and they just go crazy without being full of lunacy. It's really just this awesome, rattling, controlled mess of chaos. Construction of the music has like these strong compartments that are really beautiful and relentless and vigorous, but kind of operate like they're inside a really claustrophobic conformed space and are bouncing off the wall, but again, like controlled, just so unpredictable. Her vocals are amazing on this, seamlessly. Like she shapes her voice to characterize the lyrics so drastically and quickly, like from moment to moment. So impressive. And she uses just a lot of cool elements that don't seem like they should fit to what she's singing about. Like there will be claps and then a quick doubling track on her vocals for just like 2 words, and then a whisper and then a screech, and it all happens in like 5 seconds. It's so cool and jarring. It's really personal without trying to be profound at all. It's like unknowing of itself. She just spewed it out and just let her talent do all the work, and it works so well. Shamika's probably my favorite track. I think it got a Grammy nomination, but it's really hard to put your finger on how to describe this album to someone who hasn't heard it. It's like this punk piano album that's battling like a sleeping pill. It's really awesome. Like when you're trying to change a baby's diaper and the feet are just going wild. It's so awesome. It's so impressive. It doesn't really sound like any of her other work. The lyrics are fantastic, really vulnerable and aggressive. You know, she's coming to you and grabbing you by the throat and being like, this is how I feel. It's really awesome. You know, if probably it was my number 1 when it came out, and I didn't think that would ever change. But, you know, for personal taste, it's number 4, but I believe all the hype. It deserves a 1 spot on any publication or any of your lists that want to do it. It's awesome. So number 4, Fetch the Bolt Cutters by Fiona Apple.
I loved your description of it, Kramzer. I didn't like the album, but I loved when you talked about it.
All right, my number 4 is going to be the self-titled album from folk rock supergroup Bonnie Light Horseman. This is a group featuring Anais Mitchell, Eric D. Johnson from Fruit Bats, and Josh Kaufman, who is a multi-instrumentalist and producer who has worked with basically everybody in the indie and folk world. He was in another supergroup this year called Muzz with the lead singer of Interpol. Really great album as well. Also in my top 20, but not in my top 10. This album, though, is a mix of traditional folk songs and original material. But top to bottom, every song is excellent. But I think the real joy of this album is hearing these 2 singers each turn in some of the best vocal performances of their careers. Both have really unique kind of high nasally voices, which are kind of my favorite types of voices. And they just soar on these tracks. And you would think that taking 2 voices like that are sort of so piercing and putting them together would be overkill, but somehow it works so well together, and they both do such a good job of supporting each other when the other is singing lead. The harmonies are great, and it's just really a joy to listen to. Great songs, great production from Josh Kaufman, great instrumental work on the album. Great melodies, great vocals. It's no flaws with this one. I really love it. It's just a really, really pretty record and just really a nice record to listen to.
Kind of surprised you said you liked that Muzz album as much as you did, because you're not a big Interpol fan.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like Interpol. It's really cool. I like it.
Bonnie Light Horseman, my 31st favorite album of the year. Just missed out on the coveted 4-star ranking from moi. Moving on, number 3, and it finally happened. We finally have one album in common, and it is with Kramzer. It is Bright Eyes, Down in the Weeds Where the World Once Was. When we reviewed this album originally, it was my number 1 of the year at that time. Fallen slightly, no fault of its own. It is a fantastic album. I didn't quite know what to think of it coming in. I hadn't really kept up with Bright Eyes or Connor Oberst that much. I like his stuff, but it always kind of fell into the emo camp. I guess I'm thinking of his music from like 15, 16 years ago. So I was a little surprised to see how much he'd kind of branched out and how great this album sounds. You know, the orchestration, the instrumentation, like Kramzer said, just it's everywhere. It's overwhelming almost on some tracks. On some, it's really stripped down. The arrangements are pretty much perfect. Flea's on this album playing bass, which could be a red flag, but no, he kind of integrates himself perfectly into the music. He's noticeable at how good the bass sounds and the cool bass lines. but it's not like the Flea of Red Hot Chili Peppers where it's sort of the only thing you can hear. I think he does a great job. I think the drumming from John Theodore, who he's been in a bunch of stuff. He did some of the stuff with Mars Volta. Favorite drumming of the year, really noticeable how great it sounds. And I love the way the songs, something like Dance and Sing, can go from this big orchestra to this chicken picking banjo back into this big sort of orchestra. It all flows really well, even, sort of combining the disparate streams together. The songwriting's great. Come to appreciate Conor Oberst's voice more over the years. It's like on the verge of tears sometimes. It's very cool and unique. One and Done's probably my favorite track on here. Another sort of big orchestrated piece, a little reminiscent of, Imperial Bedroom era, Elvis Costello. Just the way everything sounds so good, just lodged in my brain all year. And just a fantastic album. Big shock for me. I never thought I'd have a Bright Eyes in my top 5, but here we are, top number 3, Down in the Weeds, Where the World Once Was by Bright Eyes.
All right, I was right. My prediction with Joe, but saw it coming after he talked about it in the album review. All right, my number 3 is going to be Notes on a Conditional Form by the 1975. I love this album. Hard not to get it at number 1 or number 2. Really ambitious project. And I will note that this is probably the album that critics are just like so heavily divisive on. It's not necessarily a love it or hate it, but like some people get it and some people don't. And I get it in a big way. Really ambitious. It's like they're trying to capture everything it is to be like young and alive right now in the world. They try to touch on everything about the world and the media, the circumstances, the social aspects, relationships, and it's done in like this cool, just big stream of consciousness. Such an embodiment of good modern young existence, even in the way it's constructed. Scatterbrain, it's attention deficit. It's song to song. It's so different, and that's the point. There's no attention span. It's self-obsessed. It's cocky. It's brash. It's vulnerable. It's failing all at once, and it's kind of done in like this epic way where it begins with the Greta Thunberg, like this is the state of the world as we know it, and then wake up, the alarm goes off, everyone's in a rush to get stuff done, and then it kind of just takes you through like a day in the life kind of vibe. And the album is kind of like this connective tissue between the brain and the heart and what it is to be alive today. Really awesome. Matt Healy is one of the best frontmen alive today. I think he can be soulful, sweet, tongue-in-cheek, obnoxious, bratty, punky, sometimes exclusively, sometimes all at once in like this big mesh. The album has like these really cool, lovely little instrumental pieces, and then it's got like some punk rockers, it's got some softer stuff, it's got like big 80s Peter Gabriel production on songs like Guys, which to me I think is the best pop song of the year. It's amazing. Another really good like radio-friendly songs like Frail State of Mind and The Birthday Party, but yeah, I think this album just has a little bit of everything, which is kind of the point. Is sort of messy and just a good reflection of what it is today. And I think their best album and the 3rd best album of the year. So Notes on a Conditional Form by the 1975.
All right, number 3 for me is going to be Old Flowers by Courtney Marie Andrews. Probably anyone that knows my taste in music could have predicted this one being on my list. I first discovered her right after she released her record, An Honest Life, and I heard the track Irene, and my ears perked up. I really thought it was one of the best songs I had heard in probably years. Her next album was called May Your Kindness Remain, and that was the record where she sort of seemed to start getting a lot more press and a lot more coverage, and I liked it. I saw her live a few times around that record release, but it was only like 40th on my list that year that it came out. I think that was 2018. Even though I enjoyed it, I didn't really feel like it fully delivered on the promise of the previous record. But here I feel like she's really, really delivering. I think this is a really kind of bold record to make at this point in her career, where her trajectory is really like keeps heading up and up and up. And to make a record that is so kind of quiet and introspective and kind of lacking any sort of single or kind of radio song. I think it's a really bold move. I think it's great. The production on it is awesome. It was produced by Andrew Sarlo, who is probably best known for producing most of the Big Thief albums. It sounds so good. The production stays out of the way of the songs. Her voice is amazing. I think she's one of these kind of like once or twice in a generation type singers. When you see her live and she's singing in front of you, it's the kind of voice that really makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. She's incredible. And yeah, I think the songs are just super, super good. The track Guilty, the chorus of that song, one of my favorite musical moments of the year, where it kind of gets slower and it's almost like she's wringing all of the emotion she can out of every word. She's like really pushing it out, but she's not singing loudly or belting, but she's just really pushing the emotion through, and it's awesome. Great record if you like folk or Americana or 70s singer-songwriter stuff, kind of like the Laurel Canyon scene. She's kind of carrying all that influence with her. So if that's your thing, this is a must listen.
Agreed. That album's awesome.
My 44th favorite album of the year. We're right here, man. We're coming up on the winners here. One more to go, so we are at our runners up, the penultimate, if you will, of 2020. For me, this is an artist that I've loved for a long time. Nobody else seems to like him that much, so kind of makes me appreciate him even more, and that is BC Camplight. Yes, Kramzer knew. You knew. If you saw my review earlier in the year, you'll know that I really like this album, and I like it even a little bit more now after some more listens. The album is shortly before Takeoff. It is it's his fifth album. He's had, a weird history. He was born in New Jersey, lived in England, got deported, came back. His last album was all about that sort of saga, and this is sort of him just being really depressed, just one of these tortured kind of anxious geniuses talking about, killing himself all the time. So this is sort of his recovery from, a long bout of depression. I think it really comes through in the music, and it's this interesting juxtaposition between these sort of depressed and downbeat lyrics, tracks like Cemetery Lifestyle and I Only Drink When I'm Drunk, Ghost Hunting. You kind of get the vibe. But the music itself is so full of life, kind of like a kitchen sink approach, a la, Brian Wilson, sort of the 60s, 70s Beach Boys stuff where, you have just all these different sounds, all, the drum sounds, the timpani, tons of piano, little flourishes. It's just a really cool, it's very synth and piano heavy, but it has the drum sound sort of from the 60s on those Beach Boys records. And it's just really kind of darkly funny. A little reminds me of Father John Misty in that way. Sort of less full of himself and self-obsessed than Father John Misty. Is a little more downbeat and self-deprecating, I think. It's the juxtaposition between the grim and the peppy. He has these beautiful vocal harmonies that come through. And then out of the blue, there's these sort of robotic kind of dark vocals that pop up, sudden change of tempo. So right when you're kind of getting comfortable and the beauty of the album kind of pulls the rug from under you. If he wanted to do a pure pop record, I think it would be amazing, but he doesn't let you have that. So it's a tough listen sometimes, but I love it. There's a song called I Want to Be in the Mafia, which is just him singing about like scenes from Goodfellas, basically, and it's great. It's a beautiful piece of music and sort of gives you a little glimpse of the less depressed side of BC Camplight. So love this album. Could have been a number one, but number two, runner-up for me, shortly before Takeoff.
Oh my God, how exciting. I thought that would be your number one, and now I have no idea what it's going to be. And hats off to you. Like you said about my review of Fetch the Bowl Cutters, I'm not crazy about this BC Camplight album, but the way you describe it is really awesome, and I love the way you do and the way it affects you. Something about him, like I'm so interested in the man and the I think he's an amazing artist, just like the way like he flushes his stuff out. But just as like a listen for me, it doesn't quite do it. But I'm very impressed with him, and we'll probably check out all the future stuff just because it's interesting to me. All right, my number 2 is going to be one that Jason already talked about, Set My Heart on Fire Immediately by Perfume Genius. Blake Mills relationship, Jason already touched on. This is just such an amazing melodrama and sobering, blissful work of art. Lush, blurry, lucid dream pop, but there's elements, like Jason was saying, of Baroque and other stuff. The vocals here are incredible. So much range. He does like really low vibratos and just really morphs his voice to do a lot of different stuff. Really good falsetto at times. I love the way he talks and writes about the way his body interprets his feelings. It's so cool. Using the physical and anatomical imagery that he does just really allows you to get into his skin and experience what he does, especially in a song like Describe. Then there's like more joyous tracks like Without You. He can do really complex songs with vast soundscapes and powerful surgical lyrics, or really kind of simple, cute songs like Jason that somehow all have the same level of unity and levity to them. A lot of songs about past boyfriends and one-night stands and crushes. Jason already said pretty much everything I got to say. It's just a really amazing, emotional piece of art that you got to check out. Was probably my number 1 up until 2 weeks ago when a surprise candidate from the back of the track just blew me away upon the second listen and has become my most listened to album. And I'll reveal that shortly. But my number 2, with the MVP of 2020 producing Blake Mills, Set My Heart on Fire Immediately by Perfume Genius.
All right. Well, the repeats are coming fast and furious now because at my number 2, I've got one that was on Joe's list. I've got Songs for the General Public by Lemon Twigs. Finally, a rock and roll record on my list, the first one, I think. And for all the people that complain about rock and roll being dead or it not being what it used to be, here come Michael and Brian D'Addario dressed like total weirdos, taking bits and pieces from pretty much every great rock band from the past and synthesizing it into some of the best music of the last decade, I think. And yes, they are heavily cribbing from the past and taking all these different ideas, but they're doing it with such attitude and such bravado. And I think with tongue in cheek, it's so good. And they walk the walk and they talk the talk, and they've got the chops to back it up. They're incredible musicians. They've become go-to session players for a lot of the LA scene. They've played on some of Foxygen's records, and they are on the excellent new Tim Heidecker record called Fear of Death with Wise Blood. And Tim described them as musical wonderkins, and having seen them live a few times, I can attest to that. Really just great, great players. Michael plays drums like Keith Moon, and then he'll come out from behind the kit and be playing guitar and doing jump kicks like David Lee Roth, and then he'll be singing without the guitar at the front of the stage, posing like Iggy Pop, and it's just really over the top, kind of ridiculous, but so much fun, so much energy. And then you've got his brother Brian on guitar, who brings a really great Beatle-esque sense of melody to all of their tunes. This is kind of a situation similar to Courtney Marie Andrews, where I absolutely love their first record, Do Hollywood. Their second one, even though I liked it, I didn't feel like it really lived up to the first one, but they're back with this one. And one of the big disappointments of the year with the COVID lockdown is that losing the opportunity to see them tour this record, because they're fantastic live. Like Joe talked about, there's all these different influences that you hear, that you can pick out in different moments, but they kind of fly by you all so fast. It's really, really great. A lot of the synths on this record, Joe mentioned them sounding like Stevie Wonder, which I can definitely hear. But I also think there's a Todd Rundgren influence, especially for his Todd and Wizard of True Star era. A lot of the synths on this record sound like those records. and everybody can take a shot since I mentioned Todd, but I'm not making that up. They've said in interviews that they're influenced by Todd. Todd appears on their second record. They've performed together live. I also hear some stuff on this record that kind of sounds like Zappa, and it's just really crazy and frenetic. The bass playing at the end of Live in Favor of Tomorrow is so insanely good. I mean, their chops are really ridiculous. They're kind of like low key on the same level as some of these other players that you hear tossed around, like Blake Mills and these other great musicians. But it's covered in so much sort of pomp and posturing that it's easy to kind of miss it. But they're really, really great players. Great songs, really fun record. Check it out. The Lemon Twigs with songs for the general public.
I was getting a little worried that it wasn't on the list yet. I thought, okay, he didn't put it on there, but you got it. Number 2. That's higher than I thought you'd have it, but I love that you have it there. Makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside.
I'm really glad in this holiday season that it's coming down to the wire that you guys shared an album, because I shared one with each of you. Now we can all, and let's keep the drinking going, as I will reiterate that I didn't love that Lemon Twigs album, but I did like it a good bit. So do another shot. Yeah, this is good. Boys, you want to talk about some honorable mentions and some dishonorable mentions before we reveal our best of 2020?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you guys have been here for 2 hours or so might as well make it even longer for you. Thanks for watching. Sticking with us here down to the wire. For me, I mentioned earlier, a long time ago, that I had about 20 albums rated 4 stars. Go through a couple. Chris Stapleton, Starting Over, Sex, Death, Infinite Void by Creeper, Good Luck with Whatever by Dawes, Future Nostalgia by Dua Lipa, Aftermath by Elizabeth Cook, Punisher, Phoebe Bridgers, Texas Gentleman, Florets, and my 11th favorite that got kicked out, Kathleen Edwards with Total Freedom. All good albums. I like the Strokes album, Run the Jewels, RTJ4, my favorite rap album of the year. So plenty of good stuff. I would say my dishonorable mention, and this might just be because I don't like this style much, but Ultra Mono by Idols is my lowest rated. Really hate that album, hate that style. And Bigger Love by John Legend is my lowest rated sort of mainstream pop album. Really just terrible, which he's actually a pretty good musician, and I've kind of liked some of his other stuff. So that was a big old disappointment. I didn't like Charlie XCX's much. Thought that was a disappointment. And really didn't like Blue Oyster Cult's The Symbol Remains. That's my lowest rated sort of classic rock. Sorry to all the Blue Oyster Cult fans out there, but thought it sucked. Some disappointments for me, but all in all, I think I liked, I have 100 albums or so rated at least 3 stars. So pretty good year as a whole.
Well, now I have no idea what your number 1 winner is going to be, because you mentioned a couple already. For me, grouped together with my top 10, but didn't make it kind of the same star rating I gave it in my notes. You've got Slow Rush by Tame Impala, Flower of Devotion by a group called Dead, Old Flowers by Courtney Marie Andrews, Harkin by Harkin, and Strange to Explain by Woods all didn't get in there. To me, the worst album of the year by far, with the worst song, is going to be what I was talking to you guys about last night, Bon Jovi's 2020, just this really reaching, exploiting way of talking about the social injustices going on in America, but it's done just so terribly and tacky. It's like just a straight up South Park cringy mocking, like the way they would write a song, like when they do that song where it's like, do you remember how you felt when you saw them towers going down? That's like as blunt and on the nose. And even the singing style of Bon Jovi on this album, it is just awful in every way there is, by far. If I could take away a star and just eliminate the universe itself, then how bad this album was.
All right. Some honorable mentions for me. Well, before I do that, I want to say that there's going to be some bonus features to this episode. As we kind of alluded to earlier, down in the description, you'll find 100-minute long playlists from each of us featuring some of our favorite tracks of the year. And in addition to that, after we release the video, we will be putting out on the community tab of the page our full top 100s at some point in the next couple days. So since you're getting all that, I don't need to say too much. I'll just run down my 15 through 11 for you real quick. 15, Out of My Province by Nadia Reid. 14, Rough and Rowdy Ways by Bob Dylan. 13, Shore by Fleet Foxes. 12, Neon Skyline by Andy Schaaf. And 11, Nobody Lives Here Anymore by Cutworms. As far as my least favorite, I'm sure there's a lot of albums that are much worse. Generally, I try to avoid that stuff. I didn't bother to listen to the new Bon Jovi. Sounds awful. But the one that I did make it the whole way through that I didn't think was very good was the latest Stone Temple Pilots album, Perdita.
Well, I'm a little heartbroken that Cutworms was 11th. That would have been great to have both at number 10, but I will survive. Here we go. Top number ones. And Kramzer, I feel like you should know what's coming. If you were paying attention throughout the year, it's an album I've reviewed, and it's the only album in my Spotify songs of 2020 that had any songs appear, and it had about 5. So
now I know.
Now you know. And this one, great reviews. It's a really weird album. I don't know if our audience is going to like it, because you kind of have to be a 90s kid to get this one. It's Rina Sawayama with her album Sawayama. And it's just so crazy. I couldn't really believe it when I first heard it. It sort of was like this, I don't even know how I heard of this artist. I guess I was looking at the best reviewed albums of the year or something like that. And it's just this incredible mix of genres that she goes through. And I don't think I've ever heard anything like it. It's similar to something like the Lemon Twigs, where it's just like she'll pick a genre, just totally master it, make a song that sounds better than anything else. You know, she jumps from nu metal to emo to Britney Spears to J-Lo, all this sort of the sound of TRL in like 2001. She just goes through and just nails all of it. It's pretty incredible what she was able to do. She kind of sounds like Amy Lee, maybe from like Evanescence on some stuff. On some stuff, she sounds like Britney Spears. But there's also this nu metal undercurrent that goes through. But it's, a song like Dynasty and Excess and STFU. It's so bizarre, but it just works. She sounds better than any Korn song, any Limp Bizkit song ever done. It's like she's parodying it, but also just mastering the whole thing. It's incredible. There's a arena kind of pop metal song called Who's Gonna Save You Now, where it blows my mind at how good it sounds. It's almost, don't take this the wrong way, it's almost like Prince did with Purple Rain, where he just was like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do it better than everyone else. It's gonna sound great. And if this was, 2001, there'd be 6 of these songs on the radio. It would be number 1. So it's just sort of her being out of town or out of place. But she's an amazing artist. The production's awesome. The vocals are awesome. It's just surprising. It's completely surprising. She's sort of funny with her lyrics, but also very personal and introspective. And it's just incredible. It's the only time this year where I went into something just completely blind and was completely blown away by what I was hearing. I almost was like, it's almost too much. It's just an oral assault. It just works. Listen to it a bunch of times. There's just all these little touches all over the place. If you love the 2000s, if you were born in like 90, from 85 to 90, sorry, Jason, I think you'll really appreciate this kind of album. If not, I don't know. It's tough. I don't think the 70s super fans are going to like this as much as I did, but I think it's just all so well done that it works, and she just masters it. And I'm really interested to hear where she goes next, because her next album could be completely different, and I'm sure it'd be good, but I think this is sort of a inimitable kind of project that she did here. So we'll see what happens, but Rina Sawayama, you got it. You nailed it for me here. My number one album of the year.
Well said. You know, you're not the resident hater. You know, it was the moment where the Grinch's heart got too big and burst. All right, my number one. Either of you guys have any guesses? No?
Not really, honestly. Miley Cyrus.
Close. Nothing from you, Jason?
Man, I don't know. What could it be?
Fleet Foxes. I'm going to say Fleet Foxes.
It could be Fleet Foxes. Is it? I don't know. You were talking about that M. Ward album a lot, but I don't think that would be your number one.
All right, well, let's open the present. I deliberately avoided saying anything about this album because I wanted it to be a surprise for my two friends here. My number one favorite album of 2020 is American Head by the Flaming Lips. An old standard. I've always really liked the Flaming Lips a lot, but admittedly thought that they had a couple albums that are now about 15 to 20 years old that they have never really lived up to, but now they finally have with this album for me. I love that this album has like an old classic album story to tell concept kind of structure, even though it's been done before, the idea of like this American mythology, but they do it so imaginatively. It's hard to describe the Flaming Lips. There's such like a rainbow of sound and ideas. If I had to say, I've been trying to think about how to describe them, and what I've come up with probably isn't any good, but I'm going to say it's like a toddler with the IQ of a genius that is in love with Sergeant Pepper, and like that's what because it's got like this childish nature. I don't know, but this album is so subtle and compact with sensory overload without it going nuts with the production. They are just so able to access weird responses and stimulations. You know, they do everything really nice and surreal and cosmic. Feels like you're always kind of floating in another galaxy, but this one is about America, and the human emotions are so relevant. You know, it's the best writing they've done in a long time. They've come up with these grand ideas for their albums recently, or, you know, from the last decade with like Embryonic and other things. This one is just kind of like, I have this idea of America and I want to do this, almost like they're approaching it in like a literary fashion. And then they just kind of write the songs that fit it perfectly. A lot of them are just kind of piano with background or whatever it is. You know, it's got that classic Flaming Lips Bowie-esque sort of Starman style, but the concept is just rooted in Americana and fiction. You know, he's like reflecting and telling the story of growing up, and it's all fiction and about doing drugs and getting caught, and it all builds into like this big tragedy where at the end, My Religion Is You is just kind of finding the meaning in all of it. Casey Musgrove comes in and hits that Americana feel with the backing vocals. It's just this big, epic, sprawling, and the emotion just creeps in really slowly. At the beginning, the album's kind of like unimpressive on just like the first few tracks on its own. I mean, it's so likable and it just keeps growing and growing. And once you get what the whole album is about and what they're saying, it's just really awesome. A lot of the songs are good on their own. It's a classic, the sum is greater than its parts album, but a lot of them you can extract and are just really pretty and simple, like Mother, I've Taken LSD, or At the Movies on Quaaludes, and they all kind of move into each other. My Religion Is You is great. Assassins of Youth, all fantastic. Mother, Please Don't Be Sad is probably my favorite track, and I was just blown away. The more I listen to it, the more I think it's just kind of a genius of Wayne Coyne and the Flaming Lips. So it is a surprise because it grew on me late and it grew on me fast, and it is American Head by the Flaming Lips.
I didn't expect that. I'll have to take another listen. I listened to it, but I don't know. The way you make it sound, it's a real grower, so maybe I got to give it a couple more shots.
I listened to it a few times. I liked it a lot, too. I think it's their best in ages. Very good.
Yeah, I think I'm not going to go out and say that it's their best album, but it's right up there with Soft Bulletin and Yoshimi and some other stuff. It's really good.
All right, my number one. No surprise here. Everybody already knows what it is. Talked about it on the channel multiple times. It is St. Cloud by Waxahachie. I've been a sort of a casual Waxahachie fan for a while. I've enjoyed all of her previous records, but never really totally fell in love with one the way that I did with this one. I think the sort of storyline with this record that you sort of see in all the reviews of it is that this is her country record or her alt country record. I don't think that's very accurate. I think there's a lot of different variety. I think there's still a good bit of the indie rock on this record that she was previously known for. The way the record opens with Oxbow, no trace of country on that song at all, but very cool. I think of this more as like a Heartland rock record. It may be the Ford pickup truck on the cover, but it has sort of this sort of Midwestern, very free, expansive space type of feel to it. It's one of these records that feels familiar the first time you hear it, but at the same time, it's fresh and it's exciting. There's songs about love and relationships on it, but a lot of the record deals with introspection and her dealing with addiction and recovery. It's very personal, but at the same time, it's universal. The melodies are great. They're memorable. I really love her voice. I think it's really unique and has a lot of character to it. It really draws you in, kind of captivates you and pulls you into the story that she's telling. And I think, it was really close between a bunch of different records at the top of my list at what I was going to put at number one. And I just think the timing of this record and coming out very near the beginning of the lockdown, and when a lot of records were being pushed back, and her decision to release it when she did, and the amount of time I was able to spend with it, really all played into it. It felt like an important part of the year to me. So that's why it's my number one.
Awesome, gentlemen. Way to go. Good list. Jason's list wasn't too surprising with its style, for sure. You're a guy that said that he goes deep, not too wide. You stand by that?
Yeah, when the top 100s come out, I'm sure you'll see all kinds of pop and hip hop and R&B and metal on Joe's list. Mine is pretty narrow in its focus, but if you're into that sort of thing, you may find all sorts of stuff that you weren't aware of on my list.
Yes, my list will not be a top 100. I'm just going to give you all 112 albums I listened to and a quick little descriptor and a star rating by it, because, my number 90 through whatever, not very good albums to me, so...
You guys both said how many you listened to this year. I didn't say yet. I listened to 214 on the year. And all of those are things that I listened to with the expectation that I would like them, except for maybe Taylor Swift, which I listened to specifically for the purpose of reviewing it on the channel. But everything else, I have that expectation that I'm going to like it. So the top half, the top 100 are stuff that I really, really did like. So
I don't take that same approach to it. I did 170. And I do try to listen to everything. So there's plenty of bad stuff, but the top 100 is all at least 3 stars. So I'll release the whole thing. You guys can pick through, but I do try to mix in some rap and lots of R&B, some pop, some straight ahead country. Just try to get everything. I like to get a whole picture of what's going on. So
I listen to mostly everything I like. There are a couple little things that I still want to get to. But yeah, I try to, I listen to the friggin' Justin Bieber album, and, I try to branch out, and I am trying to do more of trying to get my pulse on, not necessarily top 40, but a little bit more pop sound. And, there were some pleasant surprises. So, but overall, I would say this was a great year, not an immaculate year.
Solid year. Yeah, that's what I would call it. Very good. But everybody let us know what you thought of the year. What were your favorite albums? What do you think of our lists? All that stuff down in the comments. Be sure to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications. If you're new to the channel or just stumbling upon this video, we do at least 4 videos every week. So lots of content for you. We rank different artists' catalogs. We give our top 10 songs, record reviews, other random videos, and our albums of the year, which we'll be picking up next week with 97. And we're not done with 2020. We got one more listography coming next week. So we'll see you on Tuesday for that. But I do want to say thanks for the great year, everybody watching. Hope you enjoyed the videos. We enjoyed talking to everybody and getting to know people down in the comments. Looking forward to more of that in 2021. We will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.